to date, there is no provision for free movement to take up residence. And those are the broad parameters governing the movement of skilled nationals. The important part of the CSM as well is the movement of services, the movement of service providers. There are several modes in which you can provide services. You can provide services cross-border, online. You can have persons come to you to receive the service, or you can move to another member state to provide that service. There are 4 modes. Those are 3 that I can remember offhand. Now, we speak of the CSM, and sometimes people think of the CSME as a trade arrangement and as something that is just embedded in a whole lot of rules and regulations and so on. There is, however, a human face to the CSM, and I haven't seen this put better than Prime Minister Arthur put it in a paper he has in the book Contending with Destiny. And he says that the CSM is a social institution. And as a social institution, it's anchored in the skills, abilities, attitudes, perceptions, motivations, and expectations of people. And as we look at the problems we have with engaging in the CSM, we can see that it is the attitude of an immigration officer, the attitude of a customs officer, the attitude of somebody who thinks that they're going to lose their job or lose it to somebody else coming in. Those are the things sometimes that determine whether the single market is going to work or not. I just leave that for you to think about. Expected outputs, an informed public which understands and supports the CSM and participates actively. And of course, a stronger sense of community and social inclusion. Development of human capital, one of the pillars, not only development of that capital, but also efficient use of the capital. It doesn't make any sense one member state developing human capital in an area, you don't have the capacity to absorb that human capital, and nobody is moving to another part of the community where that human capital can be used. And so as we do the CVQs, as we look at all of our qualifications, that is the whole point of being a part of an integrated labor market. I'm not going to read all of them. Now, what about that labor market? That labor market is more integrated and competitive for high-level skills. So the unskilled worker is becoming an endangered species. And that is why we have moved to ensure that all workers are skilled, better skilled, and also credentialed. And I'm sure as you spoke about your vocational qualifications, you spoke about the fact that workers in industry who are skilled but who have not been certified can now be certified through that scheme of vocational qualifications. Further, because we now have a regional scheme of vocational qualifications, which I noticed you discussed already, that qualification now has additional portability. Now, the training agencies in the region have decided on a common set of occupational standards, and they've standardized the methods of deriving those standards, and also the processes for assessment. And that is what laid the basis for the Caribbean vocational qualification. And that addresses the portability of the qualifications. Coming back to the labor market, though, there are new technical and managerial competencies required. And so your vocational qualification is not a static thing. Those would have to be, the standards would have to be revised as workplaces change and as the skills required for new industries change. That addresses those radical changes in profiles, job design, and content. Security, therefore, is derived not from the fact that you have employment, but that you remain employable. And remaining employable means that you have to continue to upgrade your skills. Some of the imperatives, I'm not going to go through these, just to say, among those imperatives, therefore, are workplace training and credentialing of skills, having updated labor market information, knowing where the jobs are. It doesn't make sense training people for jobs that don't exist in your neck of the woods or in the region. And promotion of decent work and social protection. This is an area that is very, very important as we talk about persons moving around the region, because migrant labor is very often taken advantage of. And so the promotion of decent work and harmonization of what we mean by decent work and the elements of decent work is also integral to the development of systems for labor movement. The implications for workforce development need to provide potential and existing workforce participants with opportunities to acquire those skills, acquiring the relevance and portability of assuring the relevance and portability of qualifications, and facilitating the continuous improvement and upgrading of the workforce. I don't have to point out to you that this is exactly what the vocational qualifications and the CVQ sets out to do. I'm going to skip this slide in the interest of time. I'm going to skip this one as well. I just wanted to point out, however, that one of the key components of that workforce development system is an externally efficient formal education system, meaning that that education system has to give output to the society that is relevant and that it can use. The trend of thinking, and some educators still think of TVET as something that you do if you can't do anything else, and those days are long past. You would recall from what you looked at over the past 2 days that a vocational qualification system cannot work without strategic linkages among employers, unions, educators, governments, NGOs, and the individuals themselves. And so that qualification system is one, all of our qualification systems are based on partnerships, but the CVQ, more than all of the others, or the vocational qualification, the success of that is very much contingent on those strategic partnerships, and labor, employers, industry, NGOs, education, institutions, and so on, all have an important part to play. I'm not going to read the rest of that. I'm sure you've read it already. Who is involved? I've just listed some of them there. I'll skip that. Now, the specific focus on technical and vocational education and training, the thing that distinguishes TVET from other types of education and training is that it is workplace-oriented. There's a focused preparation for the job market. We bridge skill gaps through demand-driven TVET. In other words, the TVET that we provide and that for which we certify with vocational qualifications is not something that is decided by the suppliers of training, but to a large extent by the end users of that training. Not supplied, but decided on. And I know you've spoken about development of occupational standards and occupation. So some imperatives as we speak of a regional system for qualifications is improving those progression routes for TVET into further education and higher education. TVET has been seen as running on a parallel track to academic education. We have been trying to develop not only TVET frameworks in isolation, but TVET frameworks referenced to the rest of the education and the training system. And what we're aiming at is a seamless system of education and training in which a participant can decide to move from one to the other. But the only way we can do that is if we make the linkages between and among the various types of qualifications, and that is an ongoing process. We've already developed a draft framework that does that. What we have to do now is to get persons to understand that they can move from a vocational track into an academic track, and vice versa, that somebody who is in an academic track can also decide, look, I need to have more of the hands-on, more of the technical kinds of skills, and do that. Traditional TVET qualifications have been of the cul-de-sac nature. This is what I was talking about just now. And entrants usually find it difficult to get back into the general or academic system, and that is what we're trying to change. That, of course, has lowered the attractiveness of TVET and has contributed to the kind of image that TVET has had.